Yeah, let's just go to that. I've reviewed that. So let's see. I think I'll have some answers to this, which will be fine. But we'll go ahead and um, okay, I know. So the CCD is equated with the commensurable characteristic, which is like some characteristic of the thing you're looking at, which you can compare to the other thing. So an example might be like you gave, which is like a whole bunch of red objects of different kinds. The CCD might be red. Or in the
Color.
case, sorry?
Color.
Oh, right, color. Yeah. Color might be, and then the red is the measurement. And then like with a whole bunch of different animals, the CCD, the commensurable characteristic is like moving and alive, something like that. But the kind of, the size of the animal, the amount of feet or whatever, all gotten rid of.
Yeah.
That's what she's just given it a special term, that commensurable characteristic thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what the question is. No, okay, so I mean, now I know my confusion there. So no, the distinguishing characteristics are omitted, but it is referring to the CCD. Oh, what am I asking here?
But there's do a wider one. Okay,
Oh,
so
so when you go up,
concept.
when you
Yes,
go up, right, you go to the
wider.
CCD.
It's a new concept. I'll just go over it. Let's read it part by part. So when concepts are integrated, a wider one. So say, I don't know, dog into mammal, let's say.
Yeah.
The new concept mammal includes all the characteristics of its constituent units. So let's say to go into a wider one, say with dog and cat. So includes all the characteristics. Say cats meow, dogs bark, cats are small, dogs are a bit bigger. Um, cats don't have a snout, dogs do have a snout. Um, things like that. So the new concept would include all of those. Mammal includes all those things about dogs and cats. But their distinguishing characteristics are regarded as omitted measurements. So we're omitting the fact about, say, snouts
Yep.
and their size and what sounds they make. And one of their common characteristics determines the distinguishing characteristic of the new concept. In that case, would be they have hair, or they give birth to live babies is the common characteristic.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
The one representing their CCD with the existence that are being differentiated.
It is saying the character for a wider concept, whatever is picked within the CCD is taken as the new distinguishing characteristic. That's what you just said.
Yes.
Is there only one characteristic representing the CCD, or can there be multiple?
In this one, she's saying one. If we're
Okay.
going up, there's only one. That's her claim.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe not. You're only selecting one, is what it's saying.
It probably goes to show that you'd need to, I haven't done this because I just find it so hard. You need to think of your own examples and go through a whole bunch on your own. And then only then does it become clearer.
Yeah, like we did about the cats, dogs, and mammals.
Yes, exactly. Okay, yeah, so when it's subdivided, the distinguishing characteristic is a CCD.
The common characteristic is a CCD with the exist tense from which they're being differentiated.
And is given a narrow range. Okay, let's see what I ask. Actually, I can see, okay, so I said subdivision is not changing the distinguishing characteristic, which is true, actually. When you go wider, I don't mean changing in the sense is like, I mean, the distinguishing characteristic remains the same, but it's obviously the measurements are changed. I think that's what.
Yeah.
Okay, difference between CCD and a distinguishing characteristic. Well, is a commensurable characteristic always a distinguishing characteristic?
Always distinguishing. I mean, I would say so. I think distinguishing here just means like various measurements, or one thing that seems very important about the rest. Like dogs giving birth to live animals isn't exactly critical or crucial to defining a dog, but you can still call it like a distinguishing characteristic because it's something particular that these do, I guess. It's just things that can stand out compared to others.
Relative to something else, right?
Yeah, that's usually how I think of it. It's not, they're saying it's super important, but it's something distinguishing. Like, why would pick out certain things like the sound that the dog makes, the size, and maybe their color, things like that. I mean, I'm not talking about, say, the length of their hair that's in the middle of their forehead. Or I'm not talking about like how long their fingernails are or something.
Okay. So then how does that fit in with the commensurable characteristic or the CCD? Like what's the relationship between different distinguishing characters? There's only one distinguishing characteristic that you pick, but you're saying there's multiple?
Maybe in her usage here, maybe that's, I wouldn't say that's accurate actually. I would say that's my misinterpret or misstatement here. When a concept is subdivided into narrower ones. Okay, this is going down. So its distinguishing characteristic is taken as a CCD. Okay, I think I wish she was a bit more precise here what she means by distinguishing. I think that's a bit vague here, and we can kind of take it how we want. She's not very clear on what distinguishing is.
Right.
So I'm taking it as important, but
I should probably look up what she meant by that exactly. I guess it makes, because like you said, dogs bark. I don't know, but I guess the isn't the distinguishing characteristic the essential all the time, and you just changes depending.
Like it. Okay. It sounds like saying it's just its essential characteristic is taken as their CCD.
And
error measurements. So the distinguishing characteristic is taken as their CCD. Say if we're going to dog down to say boxer and Pomeranian. So let's say dog is taking the CCD is the distinguishing characteristic. In that case, the distinguishing characteristic, say, in this case would be size. Say we're distinguishing, like that's the CCD of these subdivided things. Their size. They differ in size, but it's a measurement they have in common. Like a Pomeranian is smaller than a boxer. I mean, they could say it's their range of measurements. They're on the lower end of size.
Okay.
And then so that's what it means by a narrower range. It's like Pomeranians might be, say, between, I don't know, 10 and 20 pounds.
Yeah.
1 second.
And then, okay.
Okay, yeah. So as I was saying, like the Pomeranian might be a range of like, I don't know, 5 to 10 pounds. And I'm just making that up. And let's say a boxer is like 40 to 50 pounds. Like if that's like the kind of range of size we're talking about, for example, you might not want to use those, but that's an example of subdividing the concept dog into a narrower range of specified measurements.
Right. And And so in that case, the CCD, the genus, I'm confused of what happened. So the genus is the CCD?
Well, a
And
CCD is more general. Like a CCD could just be like size. It's just a characteristic. I mean, genus would be dog. That's the thing they have. That's the category they both belong to, dog. And then you could say the species as well. How do you differentiate a Pomeranian from other dogs?
Right. So I know
Obviously,
the differentiates the size, but then so genus is dog.
yeah, you could say the difference is size, and if you're writing out a definition, you want to say something more about the size. Like you say, you want to say small dogs are Pomeranians. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to generalize that way, but if you're a child, you might do something like that, like small dogs Pomeranian, big dogs boxer. As you get older, you might realize, oh, boxers are actually one type of large dog. So you could have dog, large dog, and then you could have, I don't know, like, and then like boxer or whatever.
Got it. All right. I'll probably need to go through a few examples myself and just sit down and really get a grasp of how this works. But yeah.
Yeah, and definitely try some things that aren't animals, because animals are a bit easier to work with because we see so many, but it might be easier to have something that's not living, like, I don't know, say types of furniture or types of cars, for instance.
Yeah, okay. I'll do that as an exercise, and then just to try and clarify it, and then I'll hopefully get clearer on this whole what's genus, species, CCD, what happens with all of these.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the genus in this case. And the narrow range of specified measurements, the differentia.
Yes.
Well, the CCD is the distinguishing. Anyway, I'm going to have to do examples on this because it's
Well,
not
the
clear.
CCD is just some characters like size, and that you're differentiating them on.
Right.
You're differentiating the dogs on size. The CCD is size because you're comparing them both with the same standard, with the same type of measurement.
Yeah. Okay. This one's a kind of funny one. I was just reading this, and I was curious, like what my mind does when I read, and then I wanted to compare. So, like when I read this, what I imagine is a concept. So that was vague, but then subdivided. Like I had a visual image of a triangle, feeding up to the top of the triangle, and then narrow, just imagining two lines. And then obviously that's how, when I read this, that's what comes to my mind. Like they're just visual images. Is that thinking metaphor? I don't know if you're gonna, I'm just curious, like what, have you ever observed yourself, like when you read, what your mind does? Or would there be,
I mean, when I think subdivided, I think like a rectangle with laying wide and just cutting vertical lines down, and you've subdivided it.
Oh, okay. I thought a triangle in this case, but
I think rectangle personally.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
okay.
just where my mind goes.
You do have visual images as well, right? When you're looking at, when you're reading.
Like I can imagine like dog is the big rectangle, then I cut it up and subdivide it as in, then each little compartment is a different breed, for example. That's how that's what my mind does.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What's my question? So this is about this interrelationship between.
You started this too yourself, remember?
I don't remember.
Like
with process method.
Yeah, and then you did one thing with like chair.
Oh, yeah. But that was probably because I read this. I probably read this.
Maybe it was.
Yeah.
It was the same day you wrote that method process thing. You said that there's a related concept. It's not necessarily part of those, but it's necessary. That's what Rand here means by, which is not one of its constituent units. Yeah. I mean, habitations, nothing is not part of furniture or even the units of furniture, but you still need to know habitation. And Rand is calling that interrelationship. And
Yeah,
that kind of
although
relationship more complex.
with furniture, I do think it's something like, um, man-made goods in a human habitation that blah, blah, blah. So it's sort of included in the
Yeah.
definition, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
But then the question is, we did get on to this, and I think you said there was no real, like, it's the visual methods. I wonder if, are there these kind of relationships that it would be strange that if you can't graphically represent it and yet you have it in your head,
Yeah.
like it
I
doesn't,
know there's ways you can, but it is a bit tricky, but I
right,
definitely have some resources that explain how you could do such a thing. It's
right.
not intuitive, but you can definitely do it.
Yeah, but you mean not intuitive by like you've got like some n-dimensional linear algebra matrix
No,
or
I
something
just mean
like
like,
that?
as in you need to learn about it. It's not like you can do it without any training. Like you need to learn
Okay.
about it, and then you could do it.
Yeah,
And it
okay.
would be easy. But yeah, as an interrelationship, she's identifying here. It's like furniture is not itself a type of habitation, nor does habitation is a type of furniture. It's neither. And furniture isn't like it's like they're parallel, but they're not the same. They have a relationship, but they're not like a direct genus differential relationship.
Right. And you don't necessarily,
Yeah, you might imagine
hard
like
to know,
a 3D tree.
you
Go
might
ahead.
what?
Like you can imagine like a tree almost like as 3-dimensional, and then it gets really complicated, of course, if you're using 3 dimensions. But
Yeah. Okay. But then I guess the real question is more, how do you then clarify? I guess how are you holding it in your head when it's so hard to graphically represent? That's what I'm unclear on. Like, how is this organized in a way that's like, okay, well, furniture is a genus of man-made. The genus of furniture is man-made objects, which relates to this and that, and is dependent on this, and then this is its relationship to volition, and then furniture relates like this to habitation. Like, how do you? I don't get how the straight line up I get where you're like genus to genus to genus, but the rest is these
you might do
interdependencies.
parallel, like there's same level of abstraction, but they're orthogonal is the word you would use, or like orthogonal is like parallel to, but like at an angle to say that furniture and habitation could be at the same level of abstraction. That habitation's like broader than house or tent or something like that. It's and just like furniture is more broad than specific instances of furniture like tables and chairs. So you could say they're parallel in that way. Like furniture and habitation require the same amount of abstraction. That sort of like when they're parallel, it means like there's some connection between the two that there's a reliance even. Like if you draw a parallel line, just or a line connecting, say, furniture and habitation, and that would just indicate their just a relationship. And something that could be enough, I think, just to say that you need to form that concept first. It's a difficult thing to work through, though. I should say that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the thing is like, then those, like, if you're talking about habitation, what kind of things do you have to conceptualize to have habitation? Like,
Right.
do you know, it becomes suddenly less clear. Like, okay, are they the same level of abstraction in that, like, perhaps you need to go out and collect more evidence to understand that concept of habitation? I don't know. I need to, it's so hard. Like, I've tried to sit and think it through, but it's not like, I read in the appendix, she said, oh, I was just walking and figuring out what my mind did, and after 30 minutes I had it. Like, and I'm like stuck on one example. I can't even. I don't
Yeah.
get that, but
It might be enough for now. Just keep in mind like different types of relationships, like is like a dog is a mammal, or in a like a
yeah.
furniture is in a habitation, and those relationships are at least something to start with. To at least
Did
those like
yeah, go on, sorry.
yeah, like prepositions like in, beside, next to is things like that.
Why are you starting with prepositions? What's that about?
It's just a way to identify a relationship on almost a more perceptual level.
Are you saying I should look at the genus of prepositions? Is that, sorry, I
No,
missed.
I mean to say it's at least an easy way to begin thinking about relationships among concepts. That rather than just go right into like, what's the relationship? Well, to begin, you could start with, well,
Oh, I know what you
are
mean.
you saying
Okay,
it is a something, or is it in something?
got
Things
it.
like that.
Got it.
Maybe for
Okay,
simple
cool.
concepts, I mean, you might want to do that if you're trying to understand, say, like east and west. Like, what do those mean? Or trying to understand, say numbers or something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's more direct perceptual level stuff that might work well with at least help you identify what we're talking about. And then
yeah.
it's just easier when you get more abstract, at least, because at least you have something to work with.
Do you yeah, like work have really clear connections in my mind for basic things, and
Yeah.
then move up?
Yeah.
Do
I mean,
you
and
know
the
it?
basic things wouldn't take that long, but it's where to begin your thinking. So you don't feel lost.
So then, what would okay, let me just write this down. So start with what would I do with the prepositions?
Well, it just helps you identify relationships. Like you might not be able to use every preposition, but say like in, like
In, yeah.
furniture is in a house or is in a habitation. And that's one way to at least say there's a relationship there.
In what?
Well, just a relationship, just furniture being inside houses. I mean, that's all I mean by relationship.
Yeah, okay, but I'm not clear. Like, okay, I know how to use prepositions in speech, but then what are you
Yes.
saying I have to do in addition to?
Mm,
I'm not sure.
well, I really just meant it as a way to, um, I mean, it might not take very much more than saying, like, identify what, just to make clear the identification between, make clear the relationship between two things.
Oh, got it.
Like,
Okay. Like
like whatever
furniture
it
is
might
not on
be,
a house, it's in a house.
or yeah, or rather, it's not furniture, is not a type of habitation.
Got it.
It's not a species of habitation.
Got
But
it.
they're parallel in the sense that like furniture is inside a habitation, and trying to say that's a relationship. It's not a genus species relationship, but like I forget what term is used, but or just like parts and wholes is a similar sort of thing. Like,
I
is
don't
it a
know.
part of something? Say, imagine like an an atom is part of a molecule.
Yeah.
That's what I mean, like a part whole relationship. They're not
Okay.
necessarily genus species, but it's a part and whole relationship. And that's
Okay.
another kind of relationship.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. All right. And do you know if Aristotle did he do this method only for animals?
I don't know. He usually used this way of thinking, at least breaking things up pretty much everything. It maybe not explicitly like genus differentia, but he's always begin by making some distinctions, a taxonomy, as you'd call it. Like there's these kind of things, and like say there's good act or just way of distinguishing things first. You subdivide things, you break things up, you make
Right.
find the parts, and
But
then
he
you
didn't
analyze those.
but he wasn't like explicitly genus differentiate. It was like this is a kind of virtue and this is a sub example of this
Yeah,
sub
as far as I
acronym.
understand, he may have gotten into it more in the book categories and topics. I think that's where he gets into that
Yeah.
specifically. But other than that, I don't think so. Not
Yeah, okay.
explicitly anyway.
Yeah.
You can see it in his method, but he makes it clear and explicit, I think, in categories and topics.
Got it. Okay. Oh yeah, this one was, I was like, okay, definition of animal, living entity possessing the faculties of consciousness and locomotion. Would you say the genus is living entity or entity?
Well, living entity just seems like, well, living is an adjective, but we'll say, I don't know, living thing. Yeah, I mean, I would say a living thing entity is just a type of entity.
So it'd be entity then is the genus.
Like entity would be the genus because that's the wider concept.
Right.
And how do
So
you,
yeah.
that'd be more like a definition. Living entity might be more like a definition.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if there's a single word to use, like living. I'm like, no, that's really, how do you make a noun out of living entity? Organism. Organism, a living entity. That's how you would define it, for example.
An organism
is a living entity.
Oh yeah, I guess I was just wondering because like if you put adjective in front of the genus, but it's like entity could be a non-living thing, right?
Yes.
And then so yeah, I was wondering like, yeah, if you put the adjective, what exactly that means for the genus, and if that's part of the differentiation.
Yes.
What do you mean it's more of a definition?
Because a concept should be a single term, not two words like that. Because it's an adjective noun. You'd rather just have a noun.
Yeah.
So organism, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Yep. All right, cool. Organism is a living entity, basically. It's a concept for a living entity. Okay.
That's how you define it, yeah. Because it's the narrower instance of an entity.
Yeah.
It's a subdivision of entity.
Yeah. Although if you didn't have advanced science, could you just have that as a specific concept, subdivided entity, a subdivision of entity, calling it a living entity?
I would hesitate to call it a concept. That's just two concepts. Living is one concept, entity is another. I wouldn't say that's a new concept. It's one of these instances where you could argue that two words is one concept. I'm not sure what would be best, but I think it's clear to say that a single word is a concept whenever possible.
Maybe if you didn't have organism, it wouldn't matter. Animal would go straight to entity anyway, since if you have organism.
You wouldn't even need another category. Right. You wouldn't introduce something, probably. You're probably right.
This is just a random, let's see. So they're talking about animal again. And I was wondering, because I've seen organism, but they're distinguishing it by metabolism and entity. But, unless you may not have full knowledge of a lot of things that are currently known. And so wouldn't it make sense in that case to have your own individual hierarchy where you're like, oh, we'll just go straight to animal?
Yeah, I mean, that's how a knowledge hierarchy should be.
Yeah.
I mean, you take what you know. I mean, yeah, you might not use that at all. You might not even need the concept organism. And I could see why you wouldn't even come up with it until you have these further categories of like what's the difference in fact between a plant and an animal and things like that. I mean, before you know what a microorganism is, you might not need anything else distinguishing. There's entity and there's animal and plant. What else would you need? That's really all there is.
Exactly.
Yeah, we discover more like, we discover like amoebas. Like, now we need something else. I mean, it's not quite a plant, but it's not really an animal either. So organism means something broader because it seems more general, almost like it's a weird thing. So you might want a more general category like organism, and that's where it becomes useful.
Even I was thinking about it from the perspective of someone today who a lot of the knowledge you get is going to be secondhand. Like you're just told there's these cells but you don't know you don't really know. You just imagine, oh, a cell is a thing that's alive and it's in my body, but that's as far as you know, right? And so in that case, I was curious, like, do you just skip all these? Do you just maintain your own hierarchy, or do you try to integrate some things even though it's secondhand knowledge? Like, it's not like you really have understanding of metabolism and what it is exactly, what it refers to, other than it's just some process of using energy. Like, it's kind of floating, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 second.
Sure, no worries. It's secondhand knowledge that I've got, and I don't necessarily like, oh, okay, yeah, these things have a metabolism or whatever, and that's an organism, and I'm like, but I don't know any of that in detail. I didn't discover it. I don't know where you get that information from, or take any other scientific concept that we've integrated into our knowledge and we just use that. Isn't that floating if you then put it in your, it's all, if it's, especially if it's secondhand and you just take a few concepts out but you don't really have any clear reference for them? Like, okay, let me tell you what metabolism is. Metabolism is when you go to the bathroom. That, I mean, like, what it's, you take food, you take energy out of food and your body uses that energy, and then it's part of your digestive system. But I mean, that's all secondhand stuff to me. I don't know any of that. So is that my question is, then do you integrate stuff that's secondhand like that into?
Sometimes, I mean, it can easily become floating. I think that's why good education is important, because you don't want it to be floating. And
of course,
it probably is that way. Like, you're taught this floating abstraction. It has no meaning or grounding in reality. You just heard the term, memorized it, and that was that. I mean, that's why it's important to have good science education, which involves making those things more real, making it less abstract, and helping you go through the process of discovering what it actually means rather than reciting what it means. Like, good science education would include like the right way of doing experiments to demonstrate what these things are. I mean, that's one thing, but you might ask that in a different context, like, well, how do I validate what scientists say about viruses and the way they multiply? Because there's almost no way you can ground that unless you spend years and years studying viruses for a PhD program or something, or in a master's program. Like, at some level, there's some trust involved about, like, to what degree are they able to integrate the knowledge, and to what extent can you trust what they said based on, say, if they had used the right way of thinking and all that, which is a different issue in itself. Like, how do we come to trust what experts say? How do we integrate knowledge from others into what we know? And I think that's probably a different context of discussion, like different questions. And I think Peacock discussed it somewhere, but that's a deeper question.
All right, cool. But that's where I'd be at, because a lot of my knowledge is like that. It's not a lot of common scientific concepts too that we do use, like metabolism. I would say that's floating. Organism, I've just been handed it, but it's not, I don't have common, like, oh, there's a thing called a cell, but I have no idea where that is, what that looks like. Oh, my skin, like, you know what I'm saying? A lot of these concepts for me are totally floating.
Yeah, at least for organism, like, that's where you might in school give it a microscope and look at a plant cell, and, oh, there's a cell. Like, oh, now I see. I mean, that's the kind of thing I was thinking of.
Well, all I remember from school is like prodding at frog legs apparently to prove that there's electricity or something. So
yeah, that's not good science education. I know what you're saying, though. I can imagine what that was.
What was that? Well, I don't know what that was, but yeah.
Just imagine what it was.
Okay. The concept man can be subdivided according to special relationships.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I was like, what? So what would father be in terms of genus and differentia? What would be the genus of father and the So that's a biological relationship. But when I look at father and I say, okay, what is the genus and the differentia?
Maybe genus could be man or male.
Okay.
Um,
But it's confusing because there's a relationship in there.
well, yeah, I mean, a genus differentia is a relationship, just a type of relationship. And that type can be also biological in nature, the genus species in terms of biology, or genus species. Well, I don't know if legal relationship would be genus species.
So what's the
Economic might not isn't a genus species either. I don't think. I mean, tiny a bit of both. Like father is a type of male. I mean, but employer isn't really like a type of woman or a type of man. That wouldn't be really what you're identifying. Could be a type of person, but there's still a relationship with different things. Like employee is a relationship with an employer. Employers have employees. You don't really think of it as a type of male or a type of woman or things like that.
It's referring to you. Yeah, it's referring to a relationship. But then, how do you frame that in terms of genus and differentia?
I mean, type of person, perhaps. I mean, a lot of those are not any requirement that has to be a specific relationship in a specific way. It might not, if you're trying to work things out to some degree, it depends on the way you've organized your concepts and other concepts you have. It's not that there's a one way to organize these as much as, well, the facts of what they are determines how you will categorize them. But there's not a single way you must categorize everything, if that makes sense. I remember Rand saying somewhere like or maybe it was Peacock saying that, like, it's the characteristics, the nature of the entity itself that determines the relationships that are permissible or the relationships that do exist. But whatever relationships you do identify could be really up to you and optional to a degree. Like, we don't have to say that organize employee and employer and employee in exactly one way. Like, clearly the nature of an employee is that employers have employees, and you couldn't have an employee that employees don't have employers. Like, you couldn't swap things like that. But say if you want to talk about in what ways does employer relate to the category human, in what way does employer relate to the category father or something like that, you might have options there.
Right. Does it answer some of my question in saying this? The concept man is subdivided. So, but it seems weird to say employer is a type of man. Employee is a type of man. Maybe, and then man in a relationship with an employee.
Yeah, I mean,
that's just weird.
I mean, literally speaking, yeah, I would. An employer is a type of man. I mean, as odd as it might sound, I mean, it's still logically valid. I mean, it's logically true. I mean, an employer is a type of man, but
yeah, you're right.
You just could say more about it. Like you could specify that employer can be both a man and a woman, for example. It could be part of both of those. So you might not want to use like man and woman to distinguish employers. You might say, oh, that's irrelevant to an aspect of employers or things like that. You might just it might alter the way you organize it exactly, but you still know that like employers under man in some way or other. But it's up to you exactly how you place it in the relationship, however you draw out the relationship.
I was just thinking that woman is a type of man, and then man is a type of man.
I know, it's hilarious. It's a type of man.
Okay. All right. So then you'd say something like, we got the genus employer as a type of man, and it's something about a relationship to an employee, like an economic relationship. That's as far as I can go, but I sort of,
Yeah, I think
enough.
that's fine. That's
Okay.
usually would be enough.
But it just goes to show, like, I don't think these concepts are too advanced, and they're definitely not automatic. But
Yeah.
as in, they're not like, you don't automatically just like sofa. It's not like, oh yeah, that's a sofa. I know what a sofa is. But it's so hard to define it. Like, I've gotten here by the road of vague approximations.
Yeah.
So I can't do it. All right, what's this?
Concepts of consciousness.
Some concepts of relationships involve concepts of consciousness.
Yeah, like thought, emotion.
So
Anger,
principles, is that an
sadness.
example?
I would say so.
Yeah.
There's something you hold
Philosophical.
in mind. It's like a type of concept. So yeah, I would say so. I mean, concepts are concepts of consciousness, I think, too.
Oh, but it's saying some concepts of relationships. So it's talking about concepts of relationship. Wait, no, I'm referring to the combination concepts which involve combinations of concepts of action with concepts of consciousness. Can you think of any others? Is writing? But that's not very.
Is it?
I don't know if that's.
Maybe. I mean, it's an action.
Yeah.
And it implies a conscious action. Constant.
Yeah, but then you could say eating, because eating is, you know, it's, I don't know. Can you, action, any others that you can think of?
I mean, principle does seem like one of those, like, or virtue. Like, not only is it a concept of an action, but a way you think of these actions. Like a virtue is both an attitude and an action. Like what you think and what you do is what makes it virtue. You need the right attitude and the right actions. That's what would be virtuous. So that'd be a combination of action and consciousness. It's not just a thought or just an action. It's both. Yeah.
Man, this stuff, I've realized how little I know. And after reading this, I honestly cannot properly, I can throw off some characteristics of things. It's not like I'm saying I know nothing, but it's so vague. And it's made me very intolerant of listening to anything that's very vague, because I'm like, I already don't know much. I don't want to listen to this bullshit. Like I was listening to an interview.
I'm like that too. And over time, I think other people start to get that way too when I'm around them. When I ask them to be precise, eventually they pick up on it. It's like, then they start to not like imprecision. Like, it's like, what do you even mean by that? Is the attitude they get sometimes for things. And,
well, I would imagine some people just get annoyed. Because I went to a thing once and asked someone to give me an example because he says he likes adaptability. I'm like, could you give me an example of what you mean? He's like, common sense. It's just common sense, man.
I know.
So, but I was listening to an interview, I quickly went on a YouTube video when I was bored called Fairy Tales Through a Jungian Lens. They started going on about archetypes and energies of stories. And I'm like, oh my God, there's no way. I don't even know what economic is. Let me get rid of this bullshit. Because I couldn't make head or tails of anything they were saying when I really tried to think about it. So
yeah, I mean, that's my experience with Jungian psychology as well. It's like, yeah, okay, I get the idea vaguely, but when I really pin it down or try to get it precise, it's like, this is just vague bullshit. I have no idea what they're really saying. It's just like feelings that are reaching out at nowhere. Like when you really try to break it apart and analyze it, it's like, wait, there's nothing there. They're just stories. They're not, it's nothing.
Well, I'm feeling that about a lot of different things at the moment after reading this book. So it's just made me very conscious of that, like how little I know. Okay. But we couldn't think of anything else, hey? I guess we both don't know much.
That's a tough one. Like Virtue is the one that immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, okay.
That's the best example I have.
Okay. All right. We'll go to the
I mean, maybe
next.
that's even a way of distinguishing virtue from value. Remember, like it's hard to tell the difference between a value and a virtue. Like
Yeah.
values aren't, well, they can be both. They concepts of action and consciousness. So maybe actually it doesn't help. But I don't know. But yeah, concepts of consciousness, they're always tough.
All of this is tough. If you really try and pin it down and go, here are some examples, here are how it works in my head, here's where it goes wrong, here's why it goes wrong. But if you just utter the sentences, it's fine. But we don't want to do that. So, okay. All right, let me just read this because I don't know what I'm asking. Content and action. Okay, that's in every state of consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, and these are the CCD of all concepts. So, yeah, now I'm confused about, I wrote down thought, the genus of thought as mental activity, but how, like, I've taken action. Does that mean I've taken action as as a CCD of all thought? Is that what I'm doing? But then is action CCD of all thought? I'm trying to get my head around all these by using these terms. Is action the commensurable characteristic of all different thought? Wait, no, it's not. How can it?
Well, it is a measurement in common among all action, or among all mental activities. Is that action? We could say I almost wonder if you could have two CCDs here because it involves two fundamental attributes. That's going to have both of those measurements always to some degree or other.
Say that again, sorry.
I would think that both of those are CCDs, the way Rand wrote it out, because there's two fundamental attributes. There's two attributes in common among all mental activities. It's a measurement that they all have. So that should be a CCD. So
right, they're both. CCD. And then, but then that's what I didn't get. Shouldn't the CCD be in a genus or a differentia? Like, shouldn't it appear somewhere? Whereas I've just done mental activity as the genus.
Well, a CCD is just the standard of measurement. It does not have it's just the differentia. Like action is the differentia. There's nothing else to it. It's just the measurement of action varies. The particular measurement of the action varies, which I guess would be like intensity would be a way to measure action. Content would be like, I don't know, degree of abstraction. I mean, those would be CCDs, I think.
CCDs
they're
for
in
what,
common.
though? Like for thoughts? Because like, well, when I try to pin down what thought is, I just got it as self-initiated mental activity, and so the differentiator self-initiated, and the genus was mental activity.
Yeah, I mean, sounds right.
Then,
it's the CCD is not necessarily the essential. I mean, it's a measurement there. I mean, the CCD measurement's always there. I mean, yeah, it's a mental activity. That's the action. There's the CCD of action's always there.
Okay. I do not feel clear on that at all. But let's move to the next one. I've got to do some simple examples with CCD.
I'll just put it in one sentence, maybe. Just all concepts of consciousness have content. Say, is it abstract or not?
Yeah.
And action, like, is it an intense, focused thought or not? Is it intense or is it weak? Things like that.
Here I go again, confused on this. So let's see what the thing is.
I think two CCDs sounds like what she's saying.
Because then she said the measurable attributes of a psychological process are its content and its intensity. So now it's changed from action to intensity. But the fundamental the fundamental attributes are contents and action, but the measurable attributes are contents and intensity. Did I get that right? So CCD isn't measurable?
I'm unsure why she wrote it this way. The CCD is the intensity and the content, and those are both measurable. But I mean, why would she write those two things? I mean, why wouldn't she just write the CCD is its content and its intensity? Like, seems like she could have just wrote that, and that would be clear and direct. I don't know what's this about content and action. I didn't know it was with that. So, yeah, I'm a bit confused on why she worded it this way. Because I would say what's most consistent with her other beliefs is that any concept in a CCD is measurable. It has to be measurable. And if it weren't, you couldn't make a valid concept. So she's saying, well, you measure it with intensity and content. And that's what you should measure. And that would be consistent with anything else I've seen her write, that it needs to be, everything's measurable. And she's giving you an example exactly what is measurable. And not only that, it's common. These things are in common among all concepts of consciousness, that they all have a content and intensity.
Right.
Yeah, it should be, the way this is written makes me think that there are two CCDs and they are both always present among all concepts of consciousness.
Right. So there are two CCDs and they're both, why did I say so? Only one of the CCDs is measurable. How is the content? This is so floating for me, but
just let's think concrete versus abstract. Some things are more concrete, some things are more abstract. Dog is less abstract than quantum mechanics, like they're quite distinct.
Yeah. Okay, but CCD should always be measurable, right?
Yes,
commensurable characteristic. You can use it as a unit of measurement. But in this case, the content isn't measurable, but its intensity is. Not the content. The action, I mean, isn't measurable, but the intensity of the action is measurable.
Yeah, that seems more precise to say.
Okay.
Intensity of action seems to be a better way to phrase it. Because that is what she says the rest of it. Like, she talks about intensity, and that's definitely measurable. Like, there's more intense and less intense. That's all she means by measurable.
And okay, if something has fundamental attributes, then that is always going to be the CCDs.
I mean, the way fundamental is used, I mean, fundamental is not a word. I wish she defined it, because she uses fundamental and distinguishing in synonymous ways, and that can be confusing. Right. So what I've done usually is kind of ignore it and just think of it as two important attributes, which might not be the precision she wanted, but it gets confusing if I think what's fundamental, what's distinguishing. And unfortunately, I think that's imprecision, which maybe you could blame to it being an introductory text.
Yep. Or a lecture, it was just talk.
Yeah. I mean, this was actually written out, but that's why there's the appendix, because like there was a lot to say still. Even after this, there was a lot to say. I mean, the appendix, I think, is longer than the book.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's much longer.
So it probably in the appendix, I would bet you somebody asked something related to that.
Okay.
Like,
Well,
what did he mean exactly?
I indexed